We all know the story about the birth of Jesus Christ, including the Virgin Mary being engaged to Joseph, the wise men, the shepherds, the flight to Egypt, Herod killing the infants, and so on. But is this what really happened? We're going to find out by looking into the accuracy of what has been passed down to us in our Bibles. One of the subjects that the updated version has researched for accuracy concerns the events surrounding the birth of Jesus Christ. Almost all of the information we have about Christmas in the Bible is in the first 2 chapters of Matthew and the first 3 chapters of Luke. Let's take a look at Matthew. Here we have a rough timeline of the birth of Jesus according to Matthew. Now, it's not entirely clear in Matthew how much time passes between some of these events, so the times in this chart are just approximations. In Matthew, we have the story which involves Mary being found pregnant while she was only engaged, and while Joseph is considering divorcing her, an angel appears assuring him that everything is okay. Then, after Jesus is born, wise men from another country follow a star to Jerusalem, looking for the King of the Jews. And Herod asks them when the star appeared and to report back to him. Then the wise men are led by the star which stood over where Jesus was. They find him and opened all types of gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And before they leave, they are warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod. Then, Joseph has another dream where an angel tells him to flee to Egypt because Herod is going to try to kill Jesus. So, Joseph and Mary take Jesus to Egypt. Then, Herod kills all the infants in Bethlehem and the surrounding area, 2 years old and younger. After Herod dies, an angel appears to Joseph in a dream in Egypt, telling him to return to Israel. So, he goes back, then is warned in another dream on the way back not to go to Judea. So, instead he goes to Nazareth. Quite a dramatic series of events. Did any of that really happen? Let's find out. In researching the birth story that we have in Matthew, some serious problems began to surface. In about the last 100 years, additional evidence has been found that shows what we have in Matthew in our Bibles today is not what was there originally. This problem is not limited to just the birth narrative, but is actually found throughout Matthew. We're going to break up this discussion of Matthew into 3 sections. First, we'll talk about what evidence there is. Second, we'll go through the types of differences and some examples of them. And then third, we'll discuss what needs to be done about this. So first, here's some evidence which shows that what we have today in Matthew is not what was there originally. One of the first sources that has some good comprehensive information about this is a relatively short publication, 74 pages long, by Shlomo Pines called The Jewish Christians of the Early Centuries of Christianity According to a New Source. This came out in 1966. What Mr. Pines evaluates is an Arabic manuscript from about the year 1000 AD. As far as he knows, this text has never been studied before. The importance of this document is that it appears to use as a reference independent sources that go back to the very beginnings of Christianity. We read on page 23 regarding the Gospel of Matthew. It seems to be presupposed that the original Gospel did not contain an account of the birth and life of Jesus. What he means by this is that Matthew originally did not record a story about the birth of Jesus Christ. Matthew also did not record much of the material which we might call the narration. The narration is the extra material which ties together the events and teachings of Jesus in a logical sequence. And then he goes on to discuss the importance of this. The importance is, it is an independent tradition that seems to answer a problem that has long been debated. What is that problem? Well, from other sources, we have a quote from Eusebius, who was a 3rd century historian, and he lived from about 260 AD to 339 AD. Now, at one point, Eusebius quotes Papias. Now, Papias lived from about 60 AD to 130 AD. This was very close to the time of the original writings of the Gospels. And Papias said, Matthew compiled the sayings in the original Hebrew language, and everyone translated them as well as he could. The question is, Bid, what does the word sayings mean? As English readers, we generally expect to see books written in a narrative format. That is to say, we have a running story in chronological order of what the characters said. And we also have an ongoing narration which tells us what is going on and when it is happening. But that is not always the case in other writings. We often see writings that merely contain sayings, that is, just collections of various sayings or events. We also see that many times these collections of sayings are not written down in chronological order. In order to figure out what has happened here, it is important to understand this concept of something written as sayings. So let's take a look at how a collection of sayings in Matthew might have appeared. What we'd expect to see are various sayings or events together in one place, but not necessarily related to each other. So we could start with something like, Jesus said, "The harvest is indeed plenteous, but the workers are few. Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest that he send forth workers into his harvest." After that might be, Jesus said, "To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer also the other. And from him who takes away your cloak, don't withhold your coat also." And then after that we could have, Jesus said, "No man can serve as a slave to two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will hold to the one and despise the other. You can't serve as a slave to God and mammon." So assume this goes on like this for page after page, and then pretend that you come across it and try to make it into something that resembles a book as we know it. How would you go about putting this together? It would be very similar to a big jigsaw puzzle. So what we have in Matthew today is not just a translation, but an attempt by someone to rearrange the original material into a smooth story. This might not be so bad if it were done faithfully. Now, let's go back to the document we were looking at a few minutes ago.